Oh man, it was blows there. We had a blizzard on.
April 26, 2001. My name is Jerome Ferry. My cameraman is Alan Eggers. We're doing an oral interview with Dale Kiecksee, who was a early aviator in Cedar Rapids. Dale, could you tell us what year and when, where you were born?
Well, I was born in the west side, Cedar Rapids, in 1917, August 31st.
Mm-hmm.
You want my dad's name?
Mm-hmm.
Helmuth John. Actually, it was Johann, but they called him John. Kiecksee, and he was a carpenter contractor at the time. And my mother's name was Flossie, Mayfield maiden name. And I was born right there in the house in the west side. Grew up there, went to Taylor School up to first grade, and then I transferred over to the Trinity Lutheran Parochial School up on 6th Street and 4th Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Finished up the 8th grade there, and then from there to Roosevelt, and so on. And then to Grant, and then finally back to Roosevelt again.
Did you have a happy childhood?
Oh, well, yeah, I got into all kinds of trouble. I really did. Compared to what I've heard from some of the guys, when I was a young kid, of course, we had a neighborhood rivalry. Bob Scott and Robert Scott lived down just about 3-4 doors, and if we didn't have a wrestle or a fight almost every day, it wasn't a good day. And either at his house or mine or in the yard or anywhere. And my dad was gone, of course, working all the time, but it was a nice neighborhood, and there were good people all around.
Is Kiecksee, is that a German
name?
German name?
Yeah, Dad was full-blooded German.
Did your dad come from Germany?
No, no. He was born in Illinois and moved to South Dakota when his folks started farming. Mother was Scotch, Irish, English, and French. A whole mix-up. The Mayfield name.
Did you, do you recall the Depression, or didn't you know it was?
Well, I can excuse me. My mother baked a lot of homemade bread and all, and sold it to the neighbors to make a little money. And I would go down with a hand line back of Old Pemmican Ford, fish for carp, and sold them to the neighbors for a quarter a carp. And that helped pay for my fishing gear. Yeah, I can remember those days.
Did you spend a lot of time along the river?
Oh, well, I spent a lot of time in the woods and that sort of thing, and along the rivers. Mm-hmm. I trapped a couple of seasons. I used to ride my bike out to Prairie Creek, and I trapped from Beverly over to the mouth of the Prairie Creek in the river, the Cedar River.
Did you ever go ice skating in the wintertime?
Oh, a lot of it, and I just dearly would like to try it again. Can't find enough bodyguards to go around me if I didn't make it.
How about sledding? Did you have a lot of good sledding?
Sledding.
Yeah.
I still have one up in the garage, an old flexible flyer. And
did you slide down the Roosevelt Hill?
Oh, many times. And we'd even take the ski jumps with the sled on the north side, where they built up the ramp, for jumping a little bit. We'd take off and go over that with the sled.
Did your dad lose his business in the Depression?
He did. Well, that was part of it, but he kept on for quite a long time. But he lost his health, his heart. He had heart trouble, and the old heart give out, and so he had to do something else. And he got into insurance. Started the agency,
mm-hmm.
And the name is gone now. Eventually, it was sold to Stamey after the war. The economy and everything wasn't good enough to handle both families, mother, myself, and my brother. So I went to work.
You were telling me a story earlier that you used to ice skate up to Bruce Moore.
Yeah, on the front lawn. Yeah, that was in high school, and we take after an ice storm, when we go down that front hill on ice skates. I tell you, that's a ride.
At Bruce Moore.
Yeah, on the north slope. And Mrs. Douglas said, well, we didn't do it too often, but we did it a number of times. And Mrs. Douglas would take us into the kitchen after we were through and make hot chocolate for us.
Were you impressed with the Bruce Moore?
Oh, at that time we were impressed by the knowledge that they were very wealthy people. That was it.
The Douglases.
Yeah.
At that time, he would have, Mr. Douglas probably would have been at the meat packing. Would that have been the Douglases?
No, you're talking to Sinclair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Sinclair. The meat packers were Sinclair. There's a street name for them up here back on this side of Washington High School.
What were some of your happiest childhood memories that stick with you all of these years?
Oh, I was just busy trapping, and then later on, a friend of ours had a milk route, an independent milk route, and he worked at Pelican Ford too part-time, and he got his hands in machinery and damaged his hands so he couldn't do it. So I helped him out on the milk route. I'd go there 1 o'clock. It was Moore's Dairy, I think, that we were buying the milk from. Remember it?
Mm-hmm.
Was it E Avenue or F Avenue? And I'd do that and then go to school and come out of school, and I had a paper route. Either I was working on it my own route, or John Kitch. I don't know if you ever remember him. He was one of the old basketball players for St. Pat's. Mel Wessel and some of those guys. Anyway, I would take care of the paper route and then come home, try to do some schoolwork if I could stay awake. And 2 or 3 times I got in trouble at school. I'd go to sleep in the class till they found out what I was doing. And then, well, they didn't say too much then.
Did you, were you aware of the Wright brothers?
Oh, yeah.
Making their first flight?
And not only that, but the Wright brothers at one time were around here. I don't know if they had a bicycle shop here at the time, but they were building and selling and fixing bicycles before they got into the airplane business.
I think their dad was a minister here.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
How about Charles Lindbergh?
Well, Charles Lindbergh, of course, he was a hero. I mean, he was the big guy right at that time. And as far as I'm concerned, I still have a great regard for him. And I just saw where his wife just passed away here just a few months ago.
Yes, she did.
Yeah.
Anne, I think her name was.
Yeah.
So, what instilled in you the desire to want to take wings?
Well, I think one of the things that got me going on that was, do you remember the old pulp magazines that were very prevalent after World War I, called Flying Aces and all those? Well, I had 2 or 3 friends, older people, that were buying those and told all about these old-time pilots in World War I, the Aces, Richthofen and all that. And I'd read them things till I had them memorized practically. And I always enjoyed the picture, the streamline effect of airplanes. So I'd start sketching and drawing all the time. I was drawing streamlined airplanes before they even took the squares off the ends of each one. But I enjoyed it.
When did you see your first airplane? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. Probably, I've seen them overhead a number of times, but I think the first one was my ride with Dan.
How old were you?
I was trying to recollect that the other day, and I can't remember for sure. He was flying passengers, barnstorming.
Would you have been the age that you probably should have had permission from your mother to?
Well, I had permission from my mother because her sister, my aunt, took me up. Hunter took us both. He had an old Curtis Jenny. You remember those? Old box kites. And I better get oiled up here a little bit too.
You were talking about the Jennies with your...
Yeah, the old, an old Curtis Jenny. It was a surplus primary or basic trainer for the Air Force, World War I. And Dan was a pilot in World War I. So he had a chance to buy it for a song. And there was a lot of the old pilots were buying them and barnstorming with them. They weren't a great airplane, but they flew. And not too long ago, when I was making a trip to northern Minnesota, I was on the highway parallel to the airport at Owatonna, and I glanced over there, and then my eyes went like that. I knew I saw something there. I had to go back. I turned on, come all the way back around about a 4-mile detour, and it was a French Newport replica. And I got the old guy that built it and was flying it out in front. We talked for quite a little bit. And then he told me too that his buddy, another pilot there, was an airplane restorer. And I went around and saw one of the early Waco cabin planes. You remember those? Big baby with plants on the wheels and all. And he showed me he had a Jenny all tore down. Was restoring it, rebuilding it right from scratch. The engine was out on a bench and everything.
How old would you have been when you first took your first ride? You remember?
I'm gonna just make a wild guess, but I think probably not much more than about. I thought 10 before, but I think it'd be younger than that, maybe 5 or 6, because I don't think the old Jenny wanted to take a big load. And Dan probably, since I was small, and my aunt was with me there, we sat in that front cockpit. It was like a hot tub, a round hot tub. It was just round. Leather upholstered on the edges for a cushion.
Did that leave a lasting impression with you?
Oh, yeah, that had me then. And I never figured I would ever get around to flying that much. I don't want to, but finances were something else, always.
So did you end up getting or taking pilot's instructions?
I did after the war.
After the war you did,
Yeah.
Did you spend...
I had a few rides in the old, Dan's old Wacos, because I used to hang out there quite a bit, helping the pilots. They did their own mechanical work. Bob Strait, who was later on the top training captain for United Airlines out of Chicago, he was a Cedar Rapids guy, and Bob Nelson. I'm not so sure what Bob Nelson just passed away here just a little while ago. That name is very familiar.
Would he have been a mechanic?
No, he was a pilot. And, well, in those days, they were their own mechanic.
Yeah.
They couldn't afford it.
Because we had interviewed a Bob Nelson back in February on the other side of town.
Well, maybe he could have been. Was he a lawyer?
No. I think this was a different
Nelson.
Yes. But anyway, you spent a lot of time when you were young out to Hunter Airport. What did Dan think of that? You hanging around?
Just enough time to get in trouble. Big trouble. Because every time old Dan decided that somebody was riding in that airplane and not paying, hey, that's no go. He just ripped it into Nelson and Strait, both of them. Because I would help out with cleaning parts and getting tools, getting sandwiches for them and all. And in return, if they got her cranked up and she was all right, well, he'd take me up for a little bit. Just go around. But no, those were great days.
Did he ever get around to getting off your case and he'd let you go up with the?
Never did. Yeah. And he wouldn't, not knowing Dan.
Yeah. What type of a guy was Dan? Was he a business-like sort of person, or?
Oh, he was a sharp businessman. Yeah. And a buck was a buck, and it had his name on it. Whether the picture was right or not, he didn't care as long as his name was there. But he just chewed him out for taking me up. He ain't got so far. I got in trouble twice. Called my dad. And told my dad, he says, look, I'm going to sue you if you don't keep that kid home. If he keeps coming out here, I'm going to get you. Dad impressed me with a belt. And so...
Did it do any good?
Yeah.
What'd you do?
Irritated me.
What'd you do, just ride your bike out to the...
Yeah, I used to ride the bike all the way out. That was all gravel road out through there going clear out. I rode the bike out. And back.
Did you ever hear of Saxon Airport at that time?
Oh, sure. North Cedar Rapids. Mm-hmm. I'd drive to various airports, and I just go and see who's around, who's what.
Did you serve in the military,
Yeah.
Dale?
Yeah. Africa, Army, Signal Corps.
Signal Corps?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I tried for the Air Force, and I got bamboozled on that one, but it turned out all right.
So how long were you in service?
Just, I think 2 months or so, under 4 years.
When did you go in?
Very early, 1942.
Shortly after
Yeah.
the war started?
I was in Camp Crowder, Missouri, on the first week in February, I think it was, 42.
Yeah. When you got out, did you take advantage of the GI Bill
I did on the flying.
on the flying?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I had intentions of going in to law. I took a correspondence course with LaSalle University, Extension University, and I kind of liked the law. I guess I was argumentative or something like it. Anyway, I got papers down there yet that reminds me.
So when you did take your training, do you remember your instructor?
Oh, sure.
Let me back up. Where did you take your training at?
At Dan Hunter.
At Dan Hunter's Airport?
At the Hunter Airport down on Bowling Street.
On Bowling Street. Mm-hmm. Out there on Highway 30 in Bowling
Yeah.
Street. Do you remember who your instructor was? Was it Dan himself? Or
No,
someone?
Dan, he was busy. He was promoting. He did, amongst other things, and he just kept the pilots in charge out there. And then he'd get on them if he caught them at something they didn't like. Lee Watman, a cousin of Jim's, later on managed and owned the airport. One of the best pilots I was ever around, and a real nice guy.
Was he your instructor then?
Yeah, he was an instructor. Little guy.
Oh.
I had to go around one day with him. Well, after you fly a little while, you begin to think, hey, I got this thing pretty well lined up. And we were up in the winter day. Sun was shining bright, snow on the ground, and we were flying the old PT-19, which was an old trainer. It was a wooden trainer, a round monocoque fuselage and wooden wings. And I really loved that whole thing. It was open cockpit, front and back. He was in back. And so we were up flying out, doing something somewhere, headed somewhere. And all of a sudden, boy, I hear the banging, darn this banging and noise on that airplane. First thing I did is glance at instruments. Everything copacetic. Looked around, nothing flying loose. Looked in the rearview mirror. Here's old Lee banging the outside of that cockpit with his arms just to get my attention. See, the only way we could talk to was a Gosport, one of those hoses with a little mouthpiece. And he was just having a ball back there, scaring the pants off of me. I thought the airplanes were ready to go.
So when you did get your license, then did you take any of your family for a ride? Or?
Well, my wife rode me quite a few times, and my brother, who just passed away recent, I took him up. I took both brothers-in-law up, let's see, one in Chicago and one here. And, I had various friends and so on. I'd check them up every once in a while.
Did you do a lot of flying after you, did you log quite a few hours after you got your pilot's
I
license?
didn't log near as many as I'd like to have, but I finally come to the conclusion that I couldn't make a dime on it. And that was a real revelation. I started was almost through with my commercial course. I'd taken my check with Jim, and all I had to do was the written procedures in the airport and all that stuff. And I was out there one day, and Bob Strait, this same former pilot from Fort Ann, that worked with United Airlines, he'd come out there and he saw me, and we stopped and chatted. I'd known him for a long time there. And I knew his mother, she lived over on the west side. He used to come in and visit her every now and then. And he says, how long have you been flying? I said, I got my private, and I said, I'm almost done with my commercial. Well, he said, you want to make flying your lifetime profession? Sounds good to me, I'd like to. And he started to changed the subject, and then he says, "How old are you?" I think at that time, if I can recall, I was 27. He says, "You're too old." Boy, and I fell on my rump almost. I was real unhappy about that. I said, "I can't believe it. What do you mean too old?" "Yeah," he says, "you're too old." He says, "You want to remember," he says, "you come out of service," and he says, "about 40,000 air pilots came out too. And most of them had plenty of time in multi-engine and everything too." He said, "No airline's going to want to train you for the difference in cost there if they can get a pilot that's trained." So he said, "You don't stand a chance." Well, I got mad about the whole thing. And next time Jim was after me to get my written taken care of, I told him, "No, man, I'm not going to do it." I says, "There's no future in it for me because I'm too old." I told him the story. Well, yeah, he says, "Go ahead and get your ticket anyway." I said, "No need to. If I get the commercial, I got to have a physical every year. And if I stay in my private, I don't have to have a physical every 2 years. And I can do the very same thing that I would do on the commercial." Only difference was I couldn't charge somebody if they were riding with me. Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't care about that.
I was going to ask you about the fire at Hunter's Airport, but you would have been in service when that hangar burnt down.
I think so, yeah.
1943.
Yeah.
When you were young, was there any flying circuses in Cedar Rapids that would come to town, or Dan Hunter? Did he
There's
put
a lot
on
of traveling barnstormers that come through, and we had one performer, if you want to call him, Fred Welch. I don't know, I mentioned that to you. I think he lived right across the alley from me, and I was over there 2 or 3 times and helped him when he used to pack his own chutes. He was a parachute jumper, and also a route salesman for that bread company. It was down there on 4th Avenue East.
Colonial.
Yeah, Colonial, right. My old computer isn't that great. And he was out there, I remember one Sunday when he was out there, he had a part of the program, and what he would do, they used what they call an exhibition chute in those days. There wasn't a pack chute. You packed it all in a bag like a duffel bag, a real heavy piece of canvas duffel bag with a long, heavy harness, connected rope, harness snaps and all, and the pilot put on his harness, and then he could snap this on. But he had to climb out on the wing, climb down on the landing gear, and hook that to that bag, and then fall off. And the weight of his body was supposed to pull that chute out of the bag. And this one day it didn't pull out, and he's up there swinging around. I don't remember who was flying that plane anymore, but they flew round and round. He tried several times, couldn't get it to come loose. So he climbed back up. He just went up. He was a long, tall, skinny guy. He always wore white riding breeches and black boots when he was jumping. And so he climbed back up on the gear and managed to get what was hung up there loose. Then they went around again, and this time he dropped and his chute opened up. But that gave the crowd a real thrill. Including me.
Did you ever get an urge to pull any stunts like that?
Nope. I almost did, though. It wasn't by intention. Later on, I had one part of the program I had to complete yet on the commercial flying, and that was stalls. I'd stalled in light planes, small planes and all, but they had an old Army trainer out there, an aluminum job. It was old military, big radial engine in the front. And Lee was getting hammered by Jim to close out that part of the program, get me off the roster. He put another guy in. He wasn't making any money on me anymore. And or Dan wasn't, or Jim. And so we took off in this old trainer. Lee got after me. I come home from church, Wasn't as bad as that other picture there. Only it was wintertime, and I had a top coat on and a hat and just Oxfords. And he kept having, he called me back 2 or 3 times. I hung up on him 2 or 3 times. Finally, I said, I got to get this out of the way, that's all. He won't leave me alone. So, we took the old BT up, or I did. I had to go solo. And on the way out, in the office was Red Miner. Well, I knew him too. And I yacked with him, and I happened to think, well, Red, you used to be an instructor. I said, is there anything peculiar about this airplane on stalls? It spins. I figured if there was, he'd tell me. Yeah, good old airplane. Just waved it off, see. It says, shouldn't have any trouble. Standard procedure. So I went out west of Cedar Rapids, out there about Blairstown area, somewhere over the farm fields. Normally I would build stalls and spin a light plane at maybe 3,500 feet. This day I said, I'm not sure of this old bus. I'm going up to 10. Well, I had to wear a parachute in those days with that plane because there was no seat cushion on the seat. It was aluminum. And for something to sit on, you had to wear a chute and sit on the pack. I had a heck of a time getting that bundled up around my coat and everything, but that's all the clothes I had there. I did have my helmet, and I had kept it in the locker out there at the pilot's room, and goggles. I put them on. I took off, and I went out. I got her up to about 10 and made a couple of stalls. She seemed to be pretty good. Didn't have much trouble, so I thought, well, I'll spin her. I did, and I couldn't get it out of the spin. It just kept going round and round and round. It seemed like forever, but it wasn't. It was just seconds. So I couldn't get it out. I tried 2 or 3 times. Couldn't make it out. There's something wrong. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to have to leave this goat out here in the pasture. So I snapped my belt, pulled the greenhouse back, the cover on the cockpit, and I was getting ready to stand up on the seat to go. And I looked back and I seen his tail and hanging on there. And I thought, oh, I'll never get past that tail going around. If I could have tipped her over, I could have fall out, or something like that, but I couldn't. So I got to do it. Somehow this thing's got to come out of it. So I went back and buckled up again. This time I noticed previously. Boy, this is the, not one time, it's happened before in different ways. I knew I had to help. And I didn't even have time to ask. Because that thing was dropping like a stone. And I remember that I was getting a slight back pressure on the stick to get it forward. And when I tried to jam it up, I kind of hit with some resistance there, but the plane wasn't enough to overcome the spin. I got my foot out there, and I got that foot on the stick, and I rammed her up, hit the rudder, and that thing just stopped just like that. Of course, by that time I had to get going again to get her up before she got to the ground. I lost quite a lot of altitude, but I remember that time that it impressed me. That one time, I wasn't smart enough to figure out ahead of time I might need help and should have asked in time. But I come there walking back that day if I could have got out.
Yeah. Did you ever mention it to Red Miner after that?
Yeah, oh yeah. Every time we'd ever get together about once in a year or so, I said, remember that time I was so mad when I got back, I was going to take you on. And he said, why? And I told him. Oh, he said, oh, we always used to have to ram that thing up there just real hard to get it to stop. I said, you didn't tell me that. Well, I come near losing the airplane. And me.
And you. Do you remember the Ford Tri-Motor ever flying in this
sure.
Hunter Airport?
Benz. B-E-N-S. That was the name on the thing, that he was a traveling barnstormer with it. The flying barn door, we used to call it, or they call it. Noisy. Oh man, that whole thing shook well like one of these old ripple roofed barns, when the high wind got into it on the farm. Yeah, I took a ride with him once or twice. It had wicker seats. There were wicker bottoms and back. It only took, I think it's 7. It could carry 14, I think, but he just had usually about 7 or 8 on it. Right whirlwind engines.
Did you get to know? Did you know the Hunter family very well? There was a Dan Jr., wasn't there?
Oh yeah, I knew Dan and had talked to him many times. And knew Dan Sr. real well. And Dan's wife,
Gwen,
she was some kind of a relative of my wife's mother, distant, but I think so. That was the right relationship there.
Did he make his livelihood from the airport? What could he make enough money to support himself?
He made enough off the government that he didn't have to worry. Yeah. He milked them good.
The government programs through Cornell and through Cole College.
Oh yeah. And not only that, but he had 3 airports, one up north and one down in Hamilton, Texas.
And Spencer, he had a glider operation up there.
I don't remember what it was or not. But I by chance, I bumped into the airport down in Texas at Hamilton. I was in the military at Fort Hood. And I took a trip over there. I had friends in the town. And so I wandered out one day when I saw an airplane coming in out there and thought, well, I'll just walk over and see what kind of layout they got. So I walked over there and got to chatting with a couple of guys there in the office. And I don't know what brought it up, but somebody said, did you know Dan Hunter? And I told him, well, maybe it's because I mentioned I was from Cedar Rapids. Yeah, I knew Dan Hunter. He says, that SOB come out here? He says, we're going to hang him. He promoted this airport improvement, a great big improvement on this airport with a town of about 800 or less, and that they could be a place on the map in Texas if they had that good airport. Boy, and he got money and donations from everybody else and then scooted. Took off. He never come back. He wouldn't, naturally. That's not a very complimentary thing to be saying about somebody, but.
Who is this a picture of, Dale?
That's a picture of me, Dale Kiecksee. I can't remember the date, but it was just an occasion I happened to have been out at the airport, and I liked the looks of that plane. It wasn't mine. I later found out who it belonged to, but I can't recall it now. And so I had to go over there and get a picture with it.
Looks like you're all dressed up in your suit.
Well, the only suit. In those days. I got in trouble with that suit right off the bat. First suit I bought myself. And you remember the old dance hall that used to be out at Armar?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I went out there one night, this lady friend or a girlfriend of mine, and my buddy and his girlfriend, the girls were chums and we were chums. And we went out there and ordered a beer. Boy, I don't know. I had probably had that suit for several years. And sitting there in front of me. I paid no attention to the guy next to me. Boy, all of a sudden, he just comes around like this and wipes me up. That lights-colored suit, and the beer all over me. And I hammered him. I didn't even duck. I just, boom. And right away they had, I forget who it was, the gal that used to do the security and policing work up at Dassland.
You used to call her Ma.
Ma. Can't think of her real name. She saw this and she was after me. Well, there was a little railing in behind, decorative railing right in behind that bar there toward the outside. I jumped that and beat it to the car. Well, then the rest of the kids, they come out and we got out of there. But that messed that suit up. Well, it was fairly brand new at the time. Oh, something else. That's why my youth is something else, too. But, let's see if I can sketch you a few. Flights of memory, okay, well, that might help. My wife and I received a gift from Jim Wathen when we were married for a weekend trip into Chicago to my brother-in-law and sister-in-law's. So we were going to take the airplane. So that morning, Sunday morning, we headed out to the airport and went to roll the airplane out. And Jim happened to be over there just checking the flight line around there. Went to roll that airplane out of the hangar. That thing was a total mess with teepee all over, and honeymooner, all everything, Bon-Ami all over the blasted thing. Jim went up in smoke, and he had mechanics out there just running around all over. He says, "Get that thing washed and cleaned up right now. It ain't going out of here." So we made our honeymoon trip there, and the return of it was kind of interesting. My brother-in-law had to drive us a long ways from Harris home to a small airport out there at the west end of Chicago, where we had the airplane. And there was an accident on the road, just two-lane road, and everything blocked off. Traffic was piled up for blocks, maybe a mile or two. So we had to wait for it to be cleared before we could get out there. So it made us late getting home. And I told the wife, there's going to be a late arrival. And I said, I'm not supposed to be flying at night. I hadn't checked out for night flying. I hadn't had any night flying trips with Lee. And so I'm going to stop at Clinton and pick up extra gas. And in case we got to mosey around something to get in or out, we'll do it. So I called the airport too, and I told them, I said, we're coming in, but I said, I'm going to come in low under the normal flight pattern. That'd be about 400 feet. So we won't be up in traffic. And I said, we're going to take off right away here. When I was talking to them, we headed out and we flew all the way in. Well, the place was in all-out emergency right now. They had everything. They had the lights all going. Do you remember the floodlights they used to have out there? The beacon. They had a pickup there with about 4 guys in the back end with fire extinguishers. Well, I just slid it right in. It was just as pretty as it could be. It was no problem. So that was a honeymoon trip. And Mayfield Farm, I think I showed you that one with my uncle and aunt and the dog and my cousin. That was the only thing. It wasn't an airport. It was just a pasture, and it's up and down like this. It was a booger to get in and out of. And I had to fly in over the little country school, which was just across the road from it. My cousin was going to school over there. She was just a little girl.
Where was this, Dale?
Near Stronghurst, Illinois. And so I had to make 2 or 3 goes at it to be sure I was getting in low enough to get down quick in order to go uphill and then stay up on top after you get up above it when you landed. Well, the school lot got let out too. The whole class was out there. The teacher said, "Hey, I can't compete against that." So they come over and we visited for a little while, and then I had a picture taken there. And let's see. Lee and the Cuban 8. You ever heard of Cuban 8? Well, that was that same old wooden open cockpit airplane. And he said something over the gospel, and I didn't get it. And he said, he wiggled the stick a little bit, and I looked back, and he said, "Seatbelt." Yeah, okay. Next thing I know, I was over this way. That thing, when you do a Cuban 8, it's eight positions in roll. You start, stop, and they're abrupt, real abrupt, if you do it right. All the way down. Man, I was hanging on that belt for dear life because I was upside down. There was nothing between me and the ground. And he had me going on that one. Because I'd never gone through that maneuver before. So that was interesting. And I went to Waterloo one time. I was late with the old Army trainer again. Going up to talk to, can't think of his name, Coleman or something like that, was a manager up there. Can't remember now. We'd had a wet snow, a deep one, and then it froze. Well, everybody been running around this slush and so on, and it was frozen. So it was rough, and I had to come in on the runway, which was rough. There was just a side field there. And I landed all right. There was no problem there. But then when I went to put the brakes on, all of a sudden, whoop, wait a minute. I just made a very big arc right out into the middle of the airport. The brake froze up. One brake froze. And I just went right on around. We had to have it towed into the hangar and thaw it out. What they're talking to me about insurance. And let's see. Oh, Bemidji, Minnesota home. One night in early November, cold, man, it's cold. And I had my own plane then, or the one, two of us owned. It was a chief, a Ronca chief. Bill Tomash, you ever remember the name?
Yes, I do.
He was a restaurant owner downtown. He right close to the old Milner Hotel. He and his wife opened a restaurant in there. And Bill was a veteran. He'd never flown before. We got talking, but he did like to fish. And he said, he said, if we could get up to Lake Itasca up there, he says, I got an old buddy that has a resort up there. I said, you think you can make it all right? Oh, I think so. We'll call him and make arrangements. Okay, we'll take the plane. And then, because I usually flew just daytime, I realized afterwards that I didn't have a generator on this plane. All I had was a battery. As long as that battery held out, I had wingtip lights and tail. No instrument lights, so I took flashlight along. We read the instrument with a flashlight. And I started off in Bemidji, but they were late getting us up to the airport up there. We had a snow the night before, about that deep. I had to brush the airplane all off. We got her cackling, and we started out late. And I got down near Bacchus, you know where it is? No. South of Leech Lake. Anyway, they had a small field there. So I landed there, and I knew they had a telephone outside there we could use. So I called the field, asked them to have flares out for me. Now, that was after I'd done a few night landings and so on with Lee. So, yeah, okay, we'll put them out. When you coming in? Well, I can't tell you. It depends on the headwinds. But I said, we're taking right off from Bacchus. Well, I think they could have calculated better than I did on how long they had to have those flares, but they never bothered to checking for fuel, how much fuel they had in them. They just haul them out there and lit them. Well, the procedure was that across the entryway, depending on the wind, there's always 3 flares here, and 2 at the exit of the runway. Of course, that field wasn't lit. There was nothing down there. We come in and it was like flying inside of your hat. But Bill wanted to make this trip so bad because he hadn't been feeling good. He'd been under care with a VA and everything. They couldn't help it. They figured his time was short. That's the reason one reason I took him. I decided to do it. So we got back, and I could have landed at the old municipal, but that was just cinders and an old farm building. That was all there was there at the time. But there was no lights out there. So I thought, well, I got to do it. I just lined up with what lights were around the airport and the highway there, guessed the best I could for the runway, and we got her in. But I'll tell you, that was a night. Cold, my gosh. And then I had carburetor icing once, and the old RPM started dropping. So I lined up with a north-south highway that I was familiar with. I figured if I had to, I'd land on the highway. And I kept messing with that carburetor heat, and I finally got it to blow out, and she picked up. From there on, we came through. And when I hit Rochester, I knew it was almost a straight shot south. So I figured we were going to make it. Well, I kept going, and gee, couldn't see any big light in the sky like you'd see for Cedar Rapids. We're headed for Missouri or someplace. I don't know, but we're going. Compass heading was approximately right, but I had a couple of wind changes. We got down a long ways. We kept going, and finally Bill says, "Hey, wait, look over here." There was a big light in the sky. I said, "We're going to find out what it is. If there's a big light, there must be an airport." So we headed over. It turned out to be Waterloo. So I said, well, from here on, we just pick up the river and follow it down. And then come on in.
You ever land on the highway?
Never did, no. That would have been an easy one compared to what we did do, I guess. Because you couldn't. Oh, half the flares were out, too, when I came in. They'd burn out with lack of fuel. And there was only 2 at the one end, and then I noticed there was 2 at the other end. And I got thinking, well, if you place 3 and one of them's out, either the right side or the left side, you kind of maybe tell. So I made a guess at it, and I said, well, there's no great amount of wind at the time. I'm just going to do it. We dropped her about 6 to 8 feet out of down like this, but it didn't hurt anything. Got her in. His wife was about crazy, and so was mine. And let's see, that was spelled R-E-I-D. And they were back of Kilburn photo.
Who was this for the camera again?
Reed.
Reed.
The Reed family. Pappy Reed was the owner and organizer of the business. And then the 2 boys came in, Kenny and Harold. And they both flew. In fact, one time, all 3 of us were partners in one airplane, an old T-craft. Mm-hmm. And they're all gone now, including Harold. But Harold, he started to fly under, I think it was under Jim, I think, when he said, his was not a military or government program. But he flew a little of everything out there at different times. The one particular day, I was over in the pilot's lounge over there, and he says, hey, you want to take a little ride? I've got the boy with me. The boy was an adopted boy, a little red-headed guy. He wasn't very big. We figured we'd put him in the baggage compartment back there on elevated back of the back seat, or the right seat. Fasten him in. And we flew down around, went southeast as I recall, and coming back, Harold, for some reason, there decided he wanted to buzz that airport. And I thought, first, that's not a good idea on a Sunday. Planes coming in and out and everything, not a lot of them, but some. And then he come down and he started heading for that beacon, which is on the northwest side of the hangar. And it sets up there 60, 80 feet above the ground. And he kept coming down and kept coming down. And he just hung on. And I looked over there and his hands were on the wheel like this. Boy, and I grabbed that thing and jerked it out of his hands and pulled him out of there. We'd have wiped out right there. He just froze. Something got into him. I don't know what it was. And I never mentioned it again to him because I figured he was as scared as anybody. And with the boy with us and everything, oh man, that would have been something. Anyway, we got through that one also. I had more than my share of some of those. And we ferried airplanes for Jim, brand new airplanes from Middletown, Ohio. That was my first time on a twin engine. Well, the old twin engine, the Flying Coffin, I think they call them or something. It was a Cessna, I think, a fabric-covered twin. And there was 4 of us and Jim. We landed at the airport there at Middletown. We took delivery of 5 Arankas. And so I said, well, I ain't got any real reason for this, but I'll fly tail end back here in case somebody has to set down or something, got a little problem, we could get taken care of. So I went back on the back end, and we straddled. I've got pictures of these yet. They're harder to see in than no telephoto or anything. But I was back there, and I just swung back and forth a few times, back and forth, keep an eye on them. We flew them things all the way back into Cedar Rapids from Middletown. But I had trouble with carburation. I couldn't get above 3,000 feet. She'd start cutting out, dropping off the RPMs. And it probably was ice, but I couldn't get it. It didn't heat good enough or something. I couldn't break it up. As soon as I dropped down a little ways and got below, she started picking right up again. So I was going like this all of the big part of the trip. But Bill Smith was one of the pilots. Harold Reed was one of them. Bill Jelinek, you remember that name?
Yes, I do.
And myself. We got her home though.
You didn't have any communications with each other either.
Yeah.
Just visual.
No, they were bare airplanes.
Yeah.
And I don't recall any of them having lights even. But Bill's the guy that, he rung my bell out there with that old Army trainer. I'd been on a little training or something, I don't know. Schooling out there with it. I was alone, and I come in. I noticed it was getting low on gas, so I pulled over by the pumps. I was going to fill her. Shut her down, went into the office, or head for the office. I got part way, and Bill said, "Hey, is that thing okay for gas?" I said, "Yeah, why?" Well, he said, "I'm going to be back just a little bit." He says, "Go on in, and I'll be back." Well, I said, "You're going to be back? Okay, you're one of the students here." So I wasn't too smart. A little bit, about 20 minutes or half an hour, and the telephone was ringing off the wall. Jim come in, answer the phone. What the hell? You could hear him cussing and swearing and jumping up and down in there. What's the matter? Well, I didn't ask him. I just talked to myself. What's the matter? I'd like to get out of there, but old Jim was just a snorting boy. He was blowing steam. And he said, "Where's that airplane?" I said, "Well, I don't know. Bill took it for just a little jaunt up here somewhere." Coming right back, he said he wanted to know if there was enough gas for it, and I told him there was. His buddy was getting married in IC Church downtown, and he was buzzing the church with that thing. And I ain't kidding you, when they put that old engine in a low gear prop, it would shake china off the wall. Oh, and he was down there buzzing that church and upset the wedding ceremony. And they called, and boy, they were threatening Jim with lawsuits and what have you. And, oh, he was just a screaming when Bill got back. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, not why?" Well, he said, your tail's in it right now." I said, "Why?" "Well, he says, you're still signed out for that airplane." Ooh, yeah. Well, we got by, but it upset everything over there at the church. I bet the guy that got married, or was getting married, I bet that stuck in his mind. And you ever hear, back in your old days of school days, class prophecies?
Yes.
Yep.
Well, when I graduated from the 8th grade at the Lutheran school, one or two other kids, I guess, wrote up a class prophecy. And one of the guys in there, was an old friend of mine from there, he predicted that sometime or other during the course of our life that he was going to run into me, and I was flying, and I invited him for a little flight, a little trip. You know, I never thought anything more about that until later on when I was flying. I never at the time really understood I was going to be a pilot. But anyway, this is after the war there, and I finished up. I had my my private ticket and commercial course, but not the ticket for it. He was a professor at the University of Iowa State at Ames, an engineering professor. And he was after his PhD. He was a smart guy. Oh, he was really cookie. So I called him one day and I said, "Bob," and he had a little boy, Tommy, the godfather for him. And he said, or I told him, I said, what are you doing? You real busy?" "No." I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to fly over a little bit and I want to give you and Tommy a ride. And then I'll tell you why afterwards." "Well, okay." So I brought Tommy out to the airport and we took a little ride around and come back, and then I told him about this. He'd long forgotten about that. And I said, "I don't know how come I happened to remember it." But I said, "I made that one come true." Whether or not there's much in it or not, I don't know. And let's see,
Are you about out of?
getting
Yeah,
close?
you got a couple more pictures you want to show us, or?
Well,
Any view on
do you
there?
want these pictures in? Or you don't?
No, not unless they had something to do with you.
You do with you. That's
Well,
fine.
I think I took all the daggone albums downstairs.
That's fine.
And
What's the little plane up there?
I'm gonna stop
Is
in a
that
minute.
one? Okay.
a friend of mine that used to live here, he lives in Minneapolis now. He knew I flew, and so one day he and his wife ran across something they thought would make a good gift for me. This is the bank. You lift the windshield there, and you put the dimes or other coins in there, and there's a place under the bottom there that you can take them out after you fill up. And
What type of plane was that, Dale?
a Ford tri-motor, and that is a at this time, this Sinclair Oil Company made a great big splash with this thing advertising. Clear across country, they flew all around demonstration flights and everything to advertise Sinclair Oil with this old tri-motor. I don't even remember the pilot or at that time, but I kept it. It's a good collector's item. I don't know what I'll collect, but the best thing I can do is collect out the bottle when it fills up. And let's see. Oh, did you? We were talking about some of the personnel. Judd Corey.
That's a name that has not surfaced yet.
It hasn't.
Judd Corey.
Judd Corey was a lawyer here in Cedar Rapids, and later on was part owner of Pickwick Corporation up there along
Center Point Road.
Yeah, and Judd, he was a humpback. He had a definite bad back up and through here, humpback like, but he was a nice guy. And he had some money, and he bought an airplane, what they call a Howard Gull Wing. You remember?
Gull Wing, yes.
Big airplane. I mean, single engine, but it had a real thick wing in the front, and like this. And he bought that thing, and one day we were out there visiting on just around the grounds there, and he said, he said, I'd like to take, it was a nice day, and he said, I'd like to take that thing up, but he said, that airplane scares me. Why? Well, he said, I don't know, I think it's too big an airplane for me, or something. And he said, it scares me, and I'm afraid of it. I said, well, I'll go up with you. Would you? Yeah. So, I had never flown that airplane, but then the basics were there, the same as most of them, and we went up and I flew it and brought him back in. And we talked about some of the things there that he was afraid of. I stayed with him for another landing or two. I don't know, he wasn't too long though. He said, I'm going to get rid of that so-and-so. He says, I'm afraid of it. And we had another doctor, Doc Prouty. You remember him? Prouty? He was a chiropractor. And Prouty got in some real nice breaks with the stock market on futures, grain futures, and made a bunch of money. And he bought a Simpson 105. It wasn't a big, it was a single engine, about 4 passengers, 5 passengers, somewhere in there. And Doc was a character. He was a booze hound too, on top of that. So every night at the Flyers Club was open, those of us that would go out, he was there. Well, we rotated certain couples and all with 10 bar, whatever, and the rest of us would just sit around and yak and lie to each other. Well, the old Judd, Prouty, he was there one night, and he was really oiled, and a heck of a storm was hitting outside, and we had some of the planes. Jim come over there, and right in the middle of everything, we had to go out where we volunteered to go out in the rain and help tie down planes. They had tie downs under the wings, but they didn't all have tail tie down. And some of them things were going up and whamming down on the ground like that, So we got that tied down. And a little later, old Prouty says, hey, he says, here's the keys to the airplane. Let's go out and take a ride. Wow. I said, you crazy, there's a storm out there. No, he said, let's go. Yeah, I'm tired of this. Let's go take a ride. He would loop. And I said, no, you ain't going anywhere. And I had to chase him around that place. He kept sneaking out, wanting to go out and go. He was going to get that airplane out in front and fly it. Well, later on a trip to Minnesota, he and 2 or 3 other buddies were going up. I think they were going fishing. Anyway, they hit bad weather or something up there along the Mississippi north of Minneapolis. And he had to come down or put him down, I don't know which. And he landed. If you've ever seen those muskegs up there, you can see what looks like a clear area to land on, and you wouldn't want to land on it. You wouldn't even want to walk on it. You could go down. There's nothing there. There's just growth, and they're all on the top. Looks like land, and it isn't. Evidently, he attempted to land in one of those or over and into an area that had been timbered, logged out. And all 3 of them, or the four, whichever it was, wound up in the Mississippi and drowned in the airplane. They couldn't get out. But he was a notable character. I don't know where he ever learned.
Where was this Flyers Club at? Was it a...
Right there at the airport, just an old building that's been a warehouse or storage building next to the hangar, on the north side of the hangar. We had some real zippers out there. Bill Smith, I don't know if you had his name.
I don't.
Bill and Marge Smith. Bill's dead a long time now, but Marge lives in Newton. Whenever I'm out that way, I stop and visit with her a little bit. Anyway, Bill was a heavy boozer. And this night, or this week, there had been some work done outside there on electrical. They had a dugout or a trench out there. They never filled it up. It was filled up with mud and water. And they're still working on it, I guess. And, Bill, he said something to Marge, and it says, "Hey, you better go look for him." He didn't come back right away. I thought he was going to go to the bathroom, but he went out. And he had a brand new houndstooth suit on. Boy, it was a nasty looking outfit. And he was a manufacturer's representative for work. Anyway, I went out, I found him out there in that dugout with that suit and that mud, water, run. And I got him out, got him inside, and I said, "Marge, you want me to take him home? Or just take him?" I said, "No." I said, "I'll take him home. And I'll come back. You got the car. He shouldn't be driving it anyway." So I got him home that night.
And who is this good-looking lady, Dale?
Elizabeth Kiecksee. She's our adopted daughter. Lives in Nashville. Public Relations Director for Curb Records, and takes care of the boss's racing team. He's a very wealthy man, and he used to be a race driver. Curb Records, I don't know if you ever heard of them. They're a record company down there. At one time, he was Lieutenant Governor of the state of California, and also was a race driver. So that's his hobby.
Was your daughter, has she ever been aware of all your adventures in aviation?
Probably not too much. And some of them I didn't talk about much. Now, some of these I would say I shouldn't be, I can't say I'm proud of them. They occurred to me, but they've made a great difference in my life, because I realize now that, hey, I'm just like the Bible says, dust you are and dust you're going to return to.
That's right.
So don't get a big head on. And I found out the hard way on that. And I don't know if there's any other. Art Craning. That's the name I was trying to think of. Marion Airport. Mm-hmm. He owned and operated the Marion Airport for a number of years. And Maynard Bartling was his partner that owned the Butterfly Cafe downtown. Mm-hmm. And his wife. Yeah, Art's passed away, and I don't know about Maynard. Of course, the Butterfly's gone, but.
Dale, the History Center wants to thank you very much for sharing your memories with us and sharing stories about your family. And again, thank you very much.
Like a lot of old geezers, it's reminiscing is more fun maybe than going through it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.